The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. This proverb gets right to the point without wasting words. It identifies two different ways a person can move through life: being controlled by the fear of people, or being anchored in trust towards God. And it calls one a trap. That word snare is important. A snare is not usually obvious when you first step into it. That's what makes it dangerous. It hides itself inside normal thinking. The fear of man rarely announces itself dramatically. Most of the time, it sounds reasonable. What will people think? How will this look? What if they reject me? What if I disappoint them? What if standing firm costs me something? And before long, a person can start making decisions less from conviction and more from anxiety about reactions. That's the trap Solomon is talking about here. Not healthy awareness of others, not wisdom in relationships, but allowing the opinions, approval, or pressure of people to become the controlling force in your life. And the difficult thing is, everybody deals with this to some degree. Humans are relational by design. We care what people think because relationships matter. That part is normal. The problem starts when fear of people becomes stronger than trust in God. When external approval starts acting like the steering wheel. It's a bit like riding a bike while staring too hard at obstacles instead of the road ahead. There's this strange thing that happens sometimes. The more intensely you focus on what you're afraid of hitting, the more unstable your direction becomes. You tense up, your movements get jerky. You stop riding naturally because fear starts over-correcting everything. And spiritually, people can live like that for years, constantly adjusting themselves around potential reactions, constantly measuring words and decisions through the lens of social pressure, criticism, or approval. What makes this exhausting is that people are inconsistent. Public opinion changes constantly. One group praises what another group criticizes. One season rewards something, the next season rejects. If your stability depends entirely on human approval, your internal world will never really settle. That's why the second half of the proverb matters so much. But whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Notice it doesn't say comfortable. It says safe. Those are not always the same thing. Trusting God does not guarantee universal approval or an easy path. In fact, sometimes it creates tension because you stop letting fear dictate every decision. But the proverb says there is safety there, stability, security that is deeper than public opinion. And that kind of safety changes the way a person carries themselves. It allows you to speak honestly without becoming harsh. It allows you to stand firm without becoming arrogant. It allows you to endure misunderstanding without collapsing every time someone disapproves. Because once your deepest security is anchored, somewhere steadier than people's reactions, you stop being emotionally pulled around quite as easily. Now, this doesn't mean becoming careless about others. Scripture never promotes selfishness or arrogance disguised as boldness. There's a difference between fearing people and loving people. One is bondage, the other is responsibility. The fear of man says, I must keep everyone pleased or I lose my work. Trust in God says, I can love people honestly without handing them control over my identity. That's a huge difference. And practically speaking, this proverb reaches into everyday life more than most people realize. It affects conversations you avoid, convictions you stay silent about, boundaries you fail to establish, and even the way you present yourself publicly. A lot of unnecessary exhaustion comes from constantly managing perception, trying to curate yourself carefully enough that nobody disapproves. But that's an impossible assignment. Eventually, you realize no amount of adjustment secures universal acceptance. So the application here begins with honesty. Where is fear of people shaping your decisions more than it should? Where are you shrinking back primarily because of reaction rather than conviction? Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's subtle. But once you start noticing it, you realize how often fear quietly sits in the background influencing choices. Then comes the second part, shifting trust. Not into yourself, not into stubborn independence, but into God's steadiness instead of public instability. That shift usually happens gradually, one decision at a time, one moment of choosing honesty over image management, one moment of refusing to let fear make every choice for you. And over time, something changes internally. You stop writing tense all the time. You stop overcorrecting every few seconds because of imagined reactions around every corner. There's a steadier posture that develops. Not because people suddenly become easier to deal with, but because they stop occupying the highest place in your thinking. And that's really where this proverb lands. It's about freedom. Freedom from living trapped inside constant fear of human approval. Freedom to walk or ride steadily, truthfully, and calmly, because your foundation rests somewhere more solid than shifting opinion. Thanks for joining me here this morning, my friends and family, and anyone else who might be listening. Hope you had a good, restful Shabbat. And I hope you have a beautiful and blessed day as we move into this new week. Memorial Day. Hope to see you here tomorrow. Until then, Abba willing. Shalom, shalom.